Welcome to the Future of Giving Back, a live keynote discussion between Bandeep Singh Rangar, CEO of Premfina, and Brock Pierce, an entrepreneur. We'll be discussing how blockchain can revolutionize how we deal with poverty, global security, and even marriage. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please share, please comment, please mention friends who might want to watch this. Without further ado, Bandeep Singh Rangar.
Thank you. There will be a time when our children and grandchildren will ask us, you witnessed the biggest global pandemic in human history. It's like the collective memory we have in humanity of the Spanish flu 3 generations ago. And they will ask us, what did we do at the time? What were we doing to make a difference? It was that thought that was in my mind at the end of March. And I said, we can't sit back and just be passive people at this time in history and just work away from our office at our homes and pretend like this will just go away. This will only go away if we are active, we are proactive. That thought at the end of March germinated into the world's largest online art auction at Art & Co. 2 months later. We've connected with 7 charities that address the vast spectrum of the effects of COVID. So not only the immediate effects that you see in intensive care units, but also the people who get affected because they're alone, lonely, at home, can't access provisions easily, or suffering from mental health issues because they get depressed and lonely being in this cabin fever syndrome. There are also, unfortunately, some very sad stories coming out about domestic abuse and violence, because when the victims are locked in with their perpetrators, guess what? The violence increases and the complaints decrease. Last but not the least, the proportion of people from Black, Asian, and other ethnic minorities who are affected within the population at large, and particularly amongst the medical staff, is horrendous. And that's true in the United Kingdom, where I am right now in London, as well as the United States, where our guest Brock Pierce joins us from out in LA. Our goal was to tap into these 7 charities that spread across the various effects of the contagion and link them with people who are suffering economically. Clearly, the people who are in the fringe economy and the gig economy are suffering the most. And within them, artists who are creative and rely on their creative outputs to be shown and showcased in public galleries, they suffer the most because they have no space. All the spaces are restricted, so they can't display their creative art, and therefore they can't make a living. So that whole connectivity between artists looking for income and charities looking to be supported, because obviously the funding has dried up during this time, led us to create Art & Co. We were fortunate to have phenomenal artists, phenomenal charities, as well as some great guest speakers. Some of you tuned in 2 days ago to listen to Tim Draper, a Silicon Valley investor who's noted for his top investments in the likes of Skype and Tesla and Hotmail and SpaceX, and he gave his views. And today, we're very fortunate to have a dear friend, Brock Pierce. I had the pleasure of being at his shall I say, monastery in Puerto Rico a couple of years ago. And I watched him really break thick ice in the world to establish a new world of a digital currency that gets even more important in today's world when we are entirely digital to be functioning effectively. Please welcome, live and direct from LA, Brock Pierce.
Bandeep, grateful to be here.
Thank you. Welcome aboard. Brock, you've had some pioneering investments and more importantly, pioneering thought and leadership. What's your view on artists and how do you compare them with entrepreneurs in terms of creating your ground and creating assets that may be seen to be less valuable but only grow in value in time?
Well, I guess I would start by saying that I consider myself an aspiring artist. I began my life as an actor, so I guess I was an actor performing from the ages of 3 to 16, and so I'm a big supporter of the arts. I believe without art and culture, we'll be lost as a humanity. So always doing what I can to support artists. I'm so grateful to support the arts in this case. Well, artists are all entrepreneurs. I'm in Los Angeles right now, and so we often think of, San Francisco as the hub of entrepreneurship in the United States. I would argue that Los Angeles is a more entrepreneurial city, with artists and screenwriters and actors and, all of these people building their, call it enterprising individual things or small businesses. It's just a much more diverse form of entrepreneurship that's less technology centric. So yeah, artists are absolutely that. They are essentially run their own businesses, creating art, and it's a very difficult business because the incomes can, come in peaks and valleys, and how to manage that. And it's also one of those things, being discovered is difficult, how to sell it. And so I'm a firm believer that, yeah, artists are absolutely entrepreneurs. They are taking control, or at least attempting to have control over their own destiny, and to have the freedom to create and hopefully benefit monetarily from it, so that they can pay their bills and feed themselves, and hopefully become very successful so they can do that, do it well.
Well, they're certainly going to draw inspiration from you to kind of go it alone and do well, particularly in times of hardship or obscurity. Now, you, aside from being very early in things, you've also gone on the record, and I quote from the Rolling Stones magazine, where there was a feature interview with you, that you said you don't really need much with you. You don't really want anything. You're far more inclined to give and just be a global nomad, if you may, and also give a lot to charity. Now, most people want to hoard more and keep more. It's not a typical mindset for people to just be giving away. Where does that come from, and what's inspired you to be that way?
Well, I truly believe that the more you give, the more you get. I also believe the greatest gift there is the gift of giving. I spent a lot of time at this art event known as Burning Man, which gifting is kind of core to the principles and the culture. And it's the idea of giving with no expectation of anything in return. Sometimes people think of Burning Man as being a barter economy. It's a gifting economy. And having spent time in that environment, I said, wow, this is just such a beautiful thing to share your gifts, whatever those might be, whether they're physical things that you might give to people, or just sharing your art form. And having talked to lots of people at those events, they're like, oh, wow, this is this amazing experiment where everyone is a participant and everyone is sharing their gifts and everyone is showing up, expressing themselves as artists to some extent. But that's just at Burning Man. Then we go back to the analog world or default world, and everything goes back to normal. And I ask myself, is this really the way it has to be? Why can't we be giving, all the time? Why can't we take these principles and apply them to our everyday life? And so I made the decision to do that. And I go through life constantly gifting and trying to be of service to support others. Through that learning, through that experience, I found it to be extraordinarily, extremely rewarding. And so, at the same time, I don't need much. My goal is not to make as much money as I possibly can. I mean, I'm happy to make lots of money so that I can use those resources to do things. I think of money as a form of stored energy. And I believe that energy wants to flow like water. And so, I believe that, the things that I have don't really belong to me. I can't take them with me. And so my objective is to be a good steward of those resources and to thoughtfully or intelligently, allocate those things for the, collective benefit of us all. And so this is my sort of philosophical view. And I think another thing that where I'm different, and I'm often on record having, saying this, and that a billionaire isn't someone with $1 billion, but it's someone who's positively impacting the lives of 1 billion people. And what that really means is think of life as a game. And if life is a game, how do you measure your success? Most people measure their success by how much money they have, because that's kind of the default measurement, or the default scoreboard. But I choose to design my own sort of reality. And I measure my success by the positive impact I have, which I think is a much more interesting metric. And for those people that have, made pursuit of money their goal. The unfortunate truth is, if they are successful of reaching that goal of making their million or 10 million or whatever that number is for them, they often realize that when they achieve it, it doesn't actually bring them what they're really seeking, which is happiness in, I think, most instances. And so I encourage people to do the things that make them happy. The pursuit of money is, to a large extent, shallow, and it's not fulfilling. And so I like to tip my hat to Satoshi Nakamoto, and I like to use Japanese concepts. And one of the things, if you're not familiar with this, I recommend everyone Google it, look it up. It's called Ikigai, Ikigai. Ikigai is this Japanese concept of figuring out, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you're good at, what the world needs, and what, of course, what you're passionate about, what you love. If you figure out what you love and what you're passionate about, and it's something that you're good at, and it's something that's going to benefit others, I consider that sort of intersection, that Venn diagram, to be finding your life's purpose. And so, and if you do that, whether you make a lot of money or you make just enough to get by, it doesn't really matter, because you're happy, you're enjoying what you're doing. And if you really love what you do, and you're good at it, and you're helping others by doing it, you're going to get very good at whatever that is. And if you get really, really good at something, money normally follows. And so I would encourage people not to make money their goal, but to make these things their goal. And I think you're more likely to actually, make money if you live your life that way. So I could go on for a long time about it, but hopefully covered a few points that are the reasons I view the world the way that I do, and why I live my life this way.
Brock, I could not agree with you more. Ikigai, the pursuit of your own passion, because if you pursue your own passion, you will be excellent at it. And if you achieve excellence, you'll get adequately and more than adequately rewarded for it. So I completely believe in that line of thought. And that also makes you happy. So there you go. It's a similar notion, I suppose, of grace in Christianity. And I'm from the Sikh faith, and we have similar notions there. They're very universal. And if you follow those things, I think we'd have a much better world and a more uniting world. And your pursuit of a decentralized world seems to reflect your philosophy of non-ownership and of community benefit. How do you see blockchain and the crypto world changing and hopefully alleviating things like poverty? How can they benefit global security? And how will they change institutions, not just formal financial institutions that we all read about, but the other social institutions such as marriage? I believe you have a social contract that's a smart contract for that. So anything you can elaborate on your vision of this future that's going to benefit society at multiple levels would be great to hear.
Yeah, if we want to build a 21st century economy, one that's built on what I like to refer to as conscious capitalism. But if we want to build a 21st century economy, we're going to do that with 21st century tools. And so I think that this technology has a very important role in building a better future for all of us. And so some of the things that are relevant there is, this is a technology that has the potential, and I think will democratize the global financial system in a way where every human being on the planet have equal access. A third of the population today of the planet is unbanked. Another third or so might be underbanked, meaning they don't have the financial tools that we have, things like credit and such. And so that alone is a huge deal. If we were going to re-architect Maslow's hierarchy of needs today, having access to a computer or a cell phone and a connection, an internet connection, and having financial tools, I think, are essential to the pursuit of happiness. And so that's, I think, one example of what this can do. From a security perspective, the idea of building distributed systems is very important. Take a look at like our energy grid, for example. We have this very old infrastructure that's very centralized, meaning it has a single point of failure. I live in Puerto Rico, and so anytime there's a hurricane or an earthquake, because of that old infrastructure, the power goes down. If that was a distributed grid, meaning people had renewable energy, or call it solar panels on their houses, if one part of the network goes down, everybody else still has power, and you can connect those things on a peer-to-peer basis and create a resilient grid. And so, from a security perspective, there's a ton of stuff there. Obviously, the idea of bringing transparency is also something that can, I think, drive substantial benefits for humanity. When you put things in the light by making things transparent, it makes it much more difficult for bad actors to behave in bad ways, and creates a strong incentive for us to operate with more integrity. In terms of marriage, I like to look at things very, from an innovator's perspective. I don't look at things as they are and look at kind of minor innovations or how do we just improve slightly upon whatever is there. But I like to take a big step back and say, what if there was a blank canvas? What if we had a clean slate and we were going to rebuild something from the ground up? How would we go about doing that? And so the concept of marriage, and this is just an idea, and I don't want to, by no means am I suggesting that, marriage is a bad thing. I'm just taking a look at things and questioning, is there another way to go about doing it? Obviously, life expectancy has changed, and asking someone to make a commitment for their entire life, or someone asking you to do the same, that's a big ask, not an inappropriate ask, but a big ask. And my view is that's the intention. When you go in and make a commitment to a long-term relationship, like in the context of marriage, the objective or the goal might be to stay together for life, but realistically, that's not what happens with most people today. And so one idea is, like in business, if you're an employee, you'll meet with your boss and have a quarterly or an annual review. One of the problems I see in relationships is we're not doing regular reviews. And so by putting an expiration date on whatever that commitment is, let's say it's a year or 3 years or 5 years, I like the 1 year concept, at least from a review perspective. And that is to sit down with your partner and to say, what are the things that are working in our relationship? What are the things that are not working in our relationship? And of the commitments that we've made, how would we like to adjust or edit or modify? What would we like to add or subtract? And I think it's just a healthy process. I think a lot of relationships fail or struggle due to poor communication. And that poor communication or lack thereof can lead to things like resentment and people being unhappy. And I think a lot of times it's just a matter of better communication and building those sorts of functions in. And so I think there's room to innovate on everything. I don't look at the world as it is today and think that's how it's going to be. I think that we have the ability, we have the potential to upgrade everything. And if we want to build a world that is going to be here for our children and their children's children, it's going to require a lot of us making changes. And as I like to think or say, we only have the power to change ourselves. That's the only power we have. And so we need to look inward and try to make ourselves the best possible self we can. And through our actions, through the improving of ourselves, we have the ability to inspire others to be their best selves. And that's how we collectively upgrade, as a species, and hopefully provide the future generations with a world that they can thrive in.
Wise words there. You've obviously had time in isolation too, like most of us. What is your view of how this pandemic would have been handled if we lived in a more digital-friendly, decentralized world? And do you think that your model of living, which is even pre-pandemic, where you kind of work from your home, you follow your own heartbeat when it comes to schedules, and been remarkably successful, when most people right now are feeling nervous about their jobs, they're feeling, uncertain about their financial future, how do you get people to tune into themselves and tap into that point you mentioned earlier about the energy flows being right, and therefore looking at coping with the scenario, which could have been dramatically different, I believe, if we had a more digital economy in the first place?
Yeah. Wow. So much I could say. Well, it's the year 2020. And when I think of 2020, I think of vision. And so I like to refer to this decade as the visionary 20s, or the 1920s we referred to as the roaring 20s. I like to think of these as the soaring 20s. Let's bust out our eagle wings and let's see if we can fly. And so a lot of things, there's always a silver lining, right? And so, the thing that I encourage, everyone to do in this state, and obviously a very large percentage of the population is living in a state of fear because they don't know how they're going to pay their rent, their mortgage, put food on the table, or they're just generally uncertain about their future, their jobs, and the world is changing so rapidly. And this has been a very this has been a rude awakening, not the 2020 from Back to the Future we were all hoping for. I do think a lot of good can come from this. And the thing I encourage people to do during this time, certainly if you're still quarantining, is this is an opportunity to take a look at your life and your home. This is an opportunity to get your home in order. And I don't mean that just literally, I mean this figuratively, to look inward and to say, what are the things in my life that are serving me? What are the things that are not serving me? And if we take the time to better ourselves, when we return to hopefully a new normal, not the old normal, a better normal, we can show up in a better way, as our better selves. And so that's the main thing that I would, encourage everyone to attempt to do. And I know it can be really hard if you're living in, it's such a challenging time for so many people. My heart is also at the same time. So this has brought us all together, all of the world for, a moment basically said, we're in this together. We're all going to play our part. We're all going to show up. We're all going to be responsible and do what we can to try and prevent this pandemic from getting worse. And I think it's created some common connection between all of us, this shared experience, these shared challenges that gives us a common connection, hopefully an opportunity to look at each other with more respect and to try and provide everyone with more dignity. Hopefully it's an opportunity where we remember it's not us against them, because we are us and we are them, and we are, again, all in this together, whether you're, from the left or the right. We need to figure out a way to move forward together as, as one humanity. We're all in this together. And I just take time to sit with yourself and to ask yourself questions like, what are your values? What are your principles? What do you stand for? What are the things that you're not willing to compromise? This is an opportunity to really reflect. And if we make the time to focus on the things like this, I think that we'll all be better served and better prepared for building the world we wish to live in.
And that world is a very complex, interdependent world. I mean, right now there's a thin film of dust going across the southern United States and across Midwest America. And it started off, guess where? In sub-Saharan Africa, and it blew across the Atlantic Ocean and is settling in America. So it's not just viruses that travel, it's not just pieces of the economy that travel, it's also literally dust in the air. And it just highlights how much we are more connected than we may be visible to us in the eye. I'd love to hear your views on the charities that we're supporting. Does any one of them kind of resonate with you? Anyone that, any of the charities that kind of fall your ikigai there? We've said
they all do. I mean, they're all organizations trying to do good work and make a positive impact in their respective areas. But the one that I think stands out in a timely way right now is the race on the agenda. And this is because of, call it police brutality and the things that we've been experiencing here and throughout the world in the context of Black Lives Matter. All lives matter, but there's definitely a real problem here. And it's one that's been building up for a very long time. Something I encourage everyone to read or to look up is what's known as the doctrine of discovery. I like to research, and we often are focused on symptoms. I like to figure out the root cause. So think of the symptoms as the leaves on a tree. And so you have to go from the leaves through the branches, and from the branches to the trunk, and eventually to the root. And the doctrine of discovery is probably the original sin. That being that in 1493, the same year that Puerto Rico was discovered, white Christian males entering in the New World, which wasn't new, it was just new to them, were entitled to take anything they want. And that eventually led into the Constitution of the United States that says we the people, but it doesn't mean all the people. And so I like to study the root problem, because if you really want to treat something, you have to go all the way back to the roots. And so, I think organizations trying to impact Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities around criminal justice in particular, I think just really resonates with me right now, considering the state of things. And, they're all great organizations, but I think that's just like something we should all be mindful of, and understand how we're showing up individually and making sure that we're doing our part. It's one of these things, if we want to make change, if we want to see change, we have to be the change we wish to see in the world. And so that's the one I'd like to highlight and support.
Fantastic. Now, as an artist yourself, as of course an actor and person who's played in the media world, and now of course in the cryptocurrency and blockchain world, your views on what we believe are undervalued and pieces of art from emerging and aspirational artists will be fantastic. Could we kind of take you through our collection, and maybe you can point out some pieces that really struck your eye, and if so, why?
Yeah, we've already gone through that, I believe, because there's too many, because I'm a lover of art, but there's 4 of these pieces that stood out to me. I'm just this piece stood out to me, and I'm just such a huge fan of the color purple, especially in American politics right now. We think of red and blue, but if you put the colors red and blue together, what color do you get? You get purple. And so purple to me is significant. It's a symbol of unity right now in a nation that is very polarized. And I think the path forward is purple. So love that piece, and back to unity, right? Let's bring about that unity, and let's give ourselves a reason to celebrate. And just a reminder in life, when people at the end of a day are like, oh, my day was so bad, there was this traffic jam or something, whatever happened to me, that's focusing on the negative. Try to remember the positive things that are happening in your daily life, and then celebrate it. That's what anchors those positive memories, and that's what takes you from, having a negative bent on the reality in your life, and it allows you to transmutate or turn that into something positive. Inner light. So this is the piece that came from Burning Man, and it's the idea of that next piece. It's the inner child in all of us. We might be adults in the sense that we are living in adult bodies, but our younger self, that child self, exists in all of us. And this piece so resonates with me, which is that the 2 adults, back to back, and I like to, I envision, angry at each other or upset with each other and hurt because of triggers that have been there, but we're just little kids on the inside that want to reach out and hug and say, I love you. And so this just piece, like, it's one of my favorite pieces of art that I've seen in my entire life. And so I just love it. And and I've seen it at massive scale at Burning Man, which you can look up. And, in the same way that I talk about 1493, I believe that, knowing where we came from is really important, how we got here, because only if we understand the past can we avoid making the same mistakes that have been made in the past. So it's really important to go back in time so that we can, take the right steps moving forward in time. And I've had the pleasure of spending a bunch of time in Egyptian sort of culture and history really resonates with me. And so those were 4 of the many pieces that I liked, but all 4 of them, I think, tell an interesting story. I'm a storyteller. And so art is not just, something beautiful that has a message, but, it all has a story. And the art that resonates with me most are the ones where, someone's like, what is that? And I could go on for, an hour just talking about stories and things that, evokes in me.
Brock, we must have been like ships passing each other in the middle of the night, because I was in Burning Man myself, a fellow burner, in 2017, and kind of needed 2-3 years to recover. So probably head back there perhaps next year when the pandemic settled, and also was in Egypt in 2018. And I totally agree that we have to know where we came from to know where we're going, and not make the mistakes that were made in the past. Otherwise, we get into this endless circular loop, which doesn't get us anywhere, right? We got to break free of that. Do you have any parting words? Sorry. So
agreed. Parting words, just to remember, during this time, fear less, love more. Love is the answer. Love and operating from our hearts is, that is the path forward. And just to remind everyone that, to stay hopeful, to stay positive, as challenging as it can be in this time. And if you're struggling and you find yourself in that just kind of vicious cycle and downward spiral of negativity, remember to pick up the phone, remember to reach out to family, friends, loved ones, and ask for help. You have more support in the world around you than you often realize, and know that you're supported. If you're struggling right now, pick up the phone, reach out for help if you need it. This will get better. Hang tight and kind of surrender to the process and have faith that I don't have the answers, but collectively we do. We will get there.
In fact, reaching out for help is also made possible by one of the charities we're supporting. Is called Zate, which means for you in Bulgarian. And it's literally the first app in Eastern Europe to support the fight against domestic violence. And it's through a very cleverly disguised app. So if you can't reach out vocally, because on a phone call may be difficult, you can certainly do it through an app where it's a bit more discreet. I saw some fantastic pieces of art when I was at your place in Puerto Rico. I hope you can add more to your collection from what you saw today. Remember, you and your friends and anybody else watching, this is all for charity. A certain amount may go to the artists if they've asked for a price for their creative work, obviously to support them, which may also be heavily discounted. The bulk of it, of course, is going to charities that are being distributed across 7 charities. And as we said, they're not just the ones dealing with the immediate impact of this pandemic, but the more invisible side of things and the more consequential side of things, like mental health, depression, the racial disparities, and of course, domestic violence. So Brock, thank you so much for being there on the show. Appreciate you making this time on a weekend morning from LA. And to those of you who are following us here, you have till 7 p.m. in the UK.
Yes, I will be bidding right now. And yes, as a reminder, you have just over an hour. So if anything is calling to you, act now, because the present is all there is.
You heard that from Brock Pierce himself direct. He's bidding in the house here, Brock Pierce, and he's going to be getting his friends, and you should follow his lead, because remember, he's been very successful getting stuff early, and this is your chance to get some artists who are still early in their careers. So artandco.net, that's where you got to go and check out the fantastic 260 pieces and more of art from across the world. We have artists from Canada, from the UK, from Spain, from the Baltics, from India, and we also have some more notable items which you may want to look at, from Picasso and Salvador Dali and Andy Warhol and Jeff Koons. So you may want to get something from an artist who's more established, or the ones who are part of the canon of Western art, or someone who's about to join that establishment of art in the West with the new emerging artists. We also, to your point about the race and the agenda, have artists who represent the ethnic minorities. There's some artists who are from African heritage on our site, and there's some art that reflects that and the treatment that's been unequal for people based on their racial backgrounds. And that's, of course, something we've got to address in our lifetimes, just as we've got to address all the other points you brought there, Brock, about reviewing our marriages and looking at wedding anniversaries, not just to celebrate, but also to improve our lives and not get into attachment. I mean, I think Buddha said that a long time ago, is we got to free ourselves from attachment. And I think that's kind of your philosophy from what I can tell.
It is indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everyone for joining us online, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. Is socially friendly, namaste, sat sri akal, salam. Thank you very much. artandco.net. Thanks to all the team behind us, from Premfina, from DigiMentors, from Fable & Co., KDW Communications, JPR Media, and all those people I'm obviously typically forgetting, but hopefully I got most of you there. Thanks for your tremendous effort since the end of March to make this happen. We got about another hour or so to go to clink this, to make this a phenomenal success. We've already been successful to raise the ante, to show that the world's largest art auction can be done by people who do not come from the world of art. We're people like everyone else, is ordinary people trying to do extraordinary things. And guess what? We made it happen. Now we've got to make this auction successful, make tangible returns there for the artists and for the charities we're supporting. Every dollar, every cent, every Bitcoin, everything you want to give that has value will be shared amongst the 7 charities out there. Remember, the pandemic's not gone away. It's now hit 10 million people worldwide. About 500,000 people have died. These are confirmed. We don't know if the actual official numbers are beyond that. And we also don't know how long this is going to last. There's obviously a lot of states in the United States that are seeing increase in the viral infection headcount. We also know there's a lot of fear about second, third, and subsequent waves. There is no vaccine out there. Even when it does come out there, you got to remember it has to be effective. There have to be 5 billion of them, if not 7 billion of them produced that can be effective for the population. And there is no certainty that the virus will not mutate or new viruses will come and hit humanity again. So this is a long-term plan. This is a defensive plan. And this is a caring, giving, and loving time for us. So please go out there, buy art, contribute to the charities, contribute to the artists, share, respect, and be happy. Thank you very much. Bye now.